Yeah, I don't know how much of what I say I can keep in though, because people just react badly to when you're talking about it.
I wanna run away. I'm gonna get away and leave soon and fly straight. Put away, drowning butterfly, forever swimming in circles. Put away, drowning butterfly, forever swimming.
Hi everybody, and welcome to an emergency broadcast on behalf of the N Pod. In the middle of our Warren Ellis month, we had to break programming, an unscheduled broadcast, because of all the controversy that's been going on this week with Spiegelman's MAUS being taken off the curriculum in a school in Tennessee. Now, Tim. Actually, let's not go do now, Tim. Let's introduce Tim first. So, this is the M-Pod as well. We're on all regular platforms, all the promotion stuff. If wherever you listen to podcasts, will be the M-Pod. Spank Media is what it's uploaded through. So if you can't find one, you'll find the other. Instagram, Twitter, all the usual places. And if you agree with Tim and disagree with me, or you don't like the sound of either of us, then let us know. And, there'll be comments on some stuff and whatever. So, as I alluded to, Tim's here with me today. You all right, mate?
What up? How you doing, mate?
I'm all right. A little bit tired. Been a weary week, both for me personally and in the comics stratosphere.
My mom and my sister are in town, which is fun. I haven't seen my mom since before the pandemic, but my baby...
Really?
Yeah. But she lives in Boston, and I live in Salt Lake City now. So I grew up in Massachusetts. So I haven't seen her since November of 2019.
That's crazy.
So it's been a lot of fun. That's been fun, but my baby's sick, so I likewise am a little run a little bit ragged here. But I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this, man. I haven't read the comic in a while. I have certain things to say about that, are my impressions from having read it, and I think it's one of the great comics, and I'm very interested in controversy, which is part and parcel of the larger thing going on in this country.
I haven't read it, so I'm going to probably be speaking a little bit out of turn. However, I think we probably essentially have different approaches to this, and my concern over any small act. I mean, let's for the undoctored listener. Basically, there was a school in Tennessee that took it off its 8th grade reading list for its history curriculum. Earlier in the week, the way it was reported was that Tennessee have banned this from libraries, which is not the case. It is a very specific instance. Now, there was a board meeting whereby all motions were voted on and all that kind of thing. And it's very bureaucratic, very drawn out and business-like speak. So I probably wouldn't advise reading it for fun, but it is interesting nonetheless. Now, the issue that was presented was that there was language that wasn't befitting of 8th grade. So I think 8th grade is 12, 13 for any English listeners?
That sounds about right.
First grade's 5, and then you basically add 5 to whatever the grade is, from what I've learned this week, because I had no fucking clue, let me tell you. So, yes, there was language involved, the imagery, and there is some nudity in it. And the questions it asked, is there a place for censorship or oversight, depending on which point of view you have, in what certain ages at schools should be allowed to, what's the word? Absorb, not absorb. Should be able to, absorb, entertain, read, whatever. Fuck it, mate. Look, we'll get highbrow, and then I have to break character because I'm bleary-eyed. No excuse, because it's 2:30 in the afternoon here.
Yeah.
Tim, on the other hand, is eloquent and beautifully spoken throughout. So I think we should all thank our lucky stars that Tim's with us. So yeah, my initial reaction to this, Tim, was, well, that's a bit silly, isn't it? But I have to say, and the way that social media works and the way news reporting works, and actually why people listen to Joe Rogan these days, is because it was immediately politicized. It was seen as a blue or a red decision. And it was seen as, well, Tennessee is obviously racist. Of course, they banned a book about the Holocaust. That put red flags up for me immediately and made me determined to find out what had actually occurred. How did you see this being reported, Tim? What were your immediate reactions?
My immediate reactions, and they're still largely my same reaction, is that this was, okay, let me back up. How was this reported? It was reported as MAUS is banned in Tennessee. School board votes to censor and remove from libraries this like pretty much iconic and seminal text. I mean, it's beyond a graphic novel. It's taught in colleges, which itself may suggest that it's perhaps too advanced for your typical 7th or 8th grader, but let's table that for the time being. My initial reaction was, now keep in mind, the context of this is in this country, as any of our American listeners who are on social media or really just pay attention now, is that there is a movement afoot to ban lots of different types of texts for students in this country, largely related to race. Okay, not the question of American race as opposed to like the Holocaust. So a famous example of this is something called the 1619 Project, which is a New York Times discussion of how the story of America cannot be told without the story of slavery. That is to say, like, and in fact, America could not, in its present state, its level of power could not have occurred without slavery, the free labor upon which this country was built. So that's an example of a text that's being banned widely throughout states like Tennessee. I'm not sure in Tennessee yet, but certainly in places like Texas and others. And that's important because Texas, Matt, you probably don't know this. Why would you? Texas is where all these textbooks, the history textbooks, are written. And so whatever the Texas school boards decide is largely determines what everyone else gets to read or learn about, because that's where all the textbooks are made and the rules about them are made. Now, there's a whole thing afoot here, right, in this country, in states like Tennessee, and by like Tennessee, I mean red states. And by red states, of course, I mean conservative states, to ban books like this, not like MAUS, but like 1619 Project and a concept that we have called critical race theory. I'm not going to go into that, but that has just generally has to do with how the effect of institutional racism rather than individual racism on this country and so on. Like, we don't have to get into critical race theory, but
with that in mind, do you think there's a place for that in schools? Because it is effective.
I do think, and I think here's the thing. I think critical race theory is actually not taught in schools, but should be taught in schools. I don't think it's that controversial, to be honest. I mean, the question is like, okay, do institutions benefit certain people over others? Obviously. Like, can we please talk about that?
Can I ask you again with that? Do you think it's like Black Lives Matter, though, where it depends whose hands it's placed? Those three words in that order are irrefutable, indisputable, but in the wrong hands, then you have it is. Oh, fuck it, I'll just say what I mean. You have buildings on fire and riots. You're putting a lot of trust in individuals not to be motivated to tell a straight story. I might even just rephrase it. Like, do you think that a good idea in the wrong hands can be motivated by more sinister objectives?
I think maybe in principle, sure. I don't think that's necessarily a problem here. I mean, what you would do is you would just integrate it into an ordinary curriculum like any other thing. You perhaps would have bad apples. I'm not sure what a bad apple would look like in this instance, but
a militant black. I'm not talking about black people. Militant black sympathizers.
I guess, sure. Do I care? No, not really. Unless it's like particularly violent or widespread, and that violence is widespread, I guess I don't care. I assume it would just be taught like any other type of curriculum where you have like high school students barely paying attention, some like really into it, some don't care, like any other topic. And just having digested that stuff when I was a teenager in college, I think it was like pretty much eye-opening. I thought it was kind of life-changing to learn about that stuff when I did it in when I learned about it was like 1996. I mean, this is a body of work that goes back to the 70s, so it's like quite old, quite well established. It's I think generally, I mean, in 2022, it's not even that controversial. It was quite controversial to me in the 90s because, you know, you think about racism as something that a bad apple has, right? Like that an individual feels prejudice against another person because of their race, and it's an individual character flaw. It's a systemic thing. But I think the systemic thing is actually pretty uncontroversial at this place. And
it's very hard to find anyone that shoots straight down the middle without any unbias. I mean, look at what happened a couple of years ago with George Floyd. Now, the way that was being reported, when you speak to most people on the street, there was a there was just a black massacre by the hands of white police day in, day out in America. The fact of the matter is that untrained police are just killing a lot of people irrespective of race. Can some of those, the black killings, be racially prejudiced? I would say, of course, there is a chance of that. Looking at the numbers, and when you look at the number of white people and the number of black people, yes, there are a lot more white people in America, but the black people have more interactions with the police because of inescapable poverty, and that is the issue that should have been debated. Why is there so many areas of America with inescapable poverty that trap black people into a path that means they are having more interactions with police? The numbers look completely disjointed, but then at the same time, it's because of the number of interactions with the police and violent crime. In the wrong hands, that's when you get riots and things set on fire, as opposed to, like, we'll never get to the root cause of it if we're only looking at one of the symptoms. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it just concerns me when anything that's politicized, that can be politicized, because what's politics at the end of the day? It's not voting, it's not presidents, it's not prime ministers, it's anything with the two different opinions. It just concerns me these days in the climate that we have now. How do you get that middle ground? How do you get somebody to, one, create a curriculum, and two, to present it in a way that's completely open? I'm not saying like you have to have, well, obviously some people are racist, so we're going to teach you how to be racist this way. I don't mean that. It just always makes me nervous when things are taught in schools that can be doctored or manipulated.
I guess my response to that would be the very issues that you are talking about here, that you and I agree with you should be the types of broader sociological, political, and economic factors are the very ones that are being prohibited from being taught. So that is, so the discussion we're having right now could not happen in schools because it's not framed that way. In fact, the idea is don't discuss it at all. That's the idea of banning texts like this. So the texts that they're banning are just one.
Yes, getting back on point.
The texts they're banning are just one viewpoint, one perspective on how to analyze the question. And so what you're left with is just other viewpoints that dominate the intellectual space because these texts are being removed from schools. Now MAUS, to get really back on point, I initially viewed, so you asked for my initial reaction. My initial reaction was, this is likely to be, and I do still believe it is probably part of this emboldened school boards, and school boards emboldened to remove texts that they just personally do not like perhaps under a pretext, but perhaps not. But this is, as I said, different from the question of, the banning texts that people fear are critical race theory.
When I looked at the meeting notes from that board meeting, they went to great lengths in the meeting to try and find a workaround to have it in schools. They proposed something like a bleep or a fuzzy mouth like they use on TV or on music videos with like middle fingers and guns and stuff these days. And they said, well, can we just leave the first letter in and then just white out the rest of it? Can we remove this panel and leave it blank? Can you still tell the story without certain images? And they said that it is actually on the borderline of crossing fair uses, and they might be leaving themselves open for legal action by the author, which is Art Spiegelman, isn't it? Or the publisher, or whoever has the printing rights for it. I am not disagreeing with you. In my mind, it's almost like a censorship of censorship. If we're taking away schools' rights, and I think there's a difference with I think and feel and then what is probably likely to have happened, then where would you draw the line? Can 12 or 13-year-olds, are they now allowed to watch Schindler's List? I would say, depending on the child, because look, it's okay me and you being level-headed. Let's say if I was a parent, my kid was 12 years old. I don't think there's anything wrong with this sentence. I don't think my kid is old enough to read MAUS. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we're leaving it up to a school. Like, every class has got a wimpy kid, a sissy, a weird one. Like, like, we can't say because we are morally accurate, precise, now we know what's best for every kid. I think it's almost like a censorship of censorship. There has to be a point whereby schools choose what they teach and what they don't. However, it comes back to what we were talking about just a moment ago when I derailed it, that how do you trust them to do that with any virtue?
Yeah, I mean, here's my, I guess I would respond to that by saying, yeah, maybe, I don't know what I would have thought of that book as a 12-year-old.
It bored me to fucking tears, Tim, is what it would have done to me. And it would, I think it would have shocked me as well, mate. I think it would have fucked my head up for a little while.
I probably would have understood only parts of it, and the more shocking stuff would have been the thing that stuck with me. I was not a particularly bright I mean, you asked my mother, I was like a genius, but in my own head, having experience being 12, I was nothing of the sort.
Yeah, having a great lineage of being a Tim, I can tell you. It was nothing but a hustle.
Yeah. But here's the thing, like, you know, one of the old, like, principles of like the First Amendment, free speech in this country at least, is that you don't. So there's always been a question of like, how do you address the question of like free society in the presence of children in it, right? It's like, well, of course, many things that adults enjoy are not appropriate for kids. I mean, many things, like just watch like The Sopranos, for instance, like whatever, like really anything that's fun is not appropriate for kids.
Yeah, I watched some niche lesbian porn before we came online. Two lovely Asian ladies. They loved each other a lot.
You know, like this, like I don't know, whatever, like The Sopranos, like real art, like
yeah.
Or MAUS, for instance. So the question is not. So yeah, there might be like a weird one. I love that. It's so funny. A weird one in the class, but maybe so what you do there, the response to that is to simply say, hey, eighth grade history class parents, we're teaching this text called MAUS. Here is the potential problems with it. If you want to check it out, you can check it out here. If you want to have your kid opt out of that, you can do that rather than opting all kids out of that. Yeah. Right?
What with this specific school as well. Sorry, Tim, I'm totally bulldozing you here, mate. I was just interrupting you right, left, and centre. They said that from experience, there was a poem that had the word ecstasy in it about two people that loved each other. Or maybe I'm thinking of the song, Now We're Living in Ecstasy. Whatever that song was. Didn't sound like that, I can tell you that much. And they said that they were dealing with like a month's worth of complaints for just a word, not even like a graphic depiction. And one of the arguments that they used against them as well, they said, well, did you use it last year? They went, no, because we were in COVID times and we had to cut one module from every class. And they said, right, and you saw that as the most disposable one. It was quite funny, actually. At the beginning, the motion to table the vote was 50-50, but then once they got into the technical, no, it wasn't 50-50, it was 6-4 to have the vote. Then they had a discussion. There was another vote to leave it on the table or to leave it on the table or remove it from the table. And they voted to keep it on the table, and by the end of it, it was 10-0 against. Don't get me wrong, 6-4 vote is still, at the very beginning, they're still taking it out of the schools, so I'm not justifying it in any way. But it did seem like it was more of the legality and what format they could put it in. and the potential for upsetting parents and having to deal with that as well. I mean, I'm guessing it was a conservative school. I mean, surely you know what you're sending your... Or do you just get given a school? Or what? How does it work, Tim?
I'm sure it was a conservative... I mean, it's a conservative state. I don't know. It sounds like the school board's conservative.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, again, like the response to that is not to say take it out of the schools. The response is to say, like, okay, the ecstasy thing. Well, did you tell the parents ahead of time? Did you offer them the opportunity to opt out of it rather than banning it for all students? Probably
But I mean,
not.
it's just a word, though, isn't it? Like, it's just ridiculous.
Okay, so let's assume 10 years out of 10, 100% of parents decide to opt their kids out of instruction on MAUS. Well, then that's just how it goes. That you don't take it on.
Yeah. And also, if I was that teacher, I'd be saying, I'm only banned from showing it you.
I'm banned from telling you about this book, and then tell them slightly, and in the description, tell them about the book and then where they can find it. I mean, here's the thing: as everyone knows, the best way to get a kid to read a book is to tell them that it's banned.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in a sense, like as we've seen here, like if you try to order MAUS online, it's impossible.
It's impossible. It's in the top 4 historical fiction, history, fiction. Like what's it called? Like that middle ground where it's history, but it's like maybe graphic history. All 4 versions are in the top 5. The deluxe hardcover, the combined paperback, and volumes 1 and 2 were the top 4. And I think in historical full stop, it's like 4 of the top 15 or something. In Comics Conspiracy, Ryan Higgins, he put a tweet out, said, if anybody in Tennessee wants this book for free, we'll send it to you.
Yeah, I saw that.
But I feel like it was a bit self-flagellatory. Like the guy just loves a little bit. He loves to be. I think with him, a lot of it's about image. Do you know what I mean? Don't kick a guy for doing a good deed, but he does just feel a little bit slimy, doesn't he? A little bit.
He said that about something else. There's something else that was banned. Like I forget what it was, but he said that before. And I kind of wonder, like, if anyone took him up on that, whether that tweet would stop coming.
He was expecting it to be a couple, and the 15 they had in stock were all gone in a day, and he's had to order hundreds apparently. Fair play to him, though. I mean, look, it's a good gesture, like fair play to him. But I think he's more I think he would have weighed up. Because he goes into the nuts and bolts of what running a comic shop is, and he goes into the intricacies. And he is quite smug when they do well. Like, don't get me wrong, I would be as well. But like he would have weighed up the, what do we call it, the reputational collateral of the
Yes.
Of
Okay,
the
you made
acts.
your point.
Brubaker could learn a lot from Ryan Higgins. Let me tell you that much.
And that's just not to say. Let me just say, I find Ryan's not that I know Ryan other than on Twitter, occasionally, but I find his podcast very entertaining. I like that.
I really like them.
I like it a lot.
Because he gives you the nuts and bolts, like the stuff you don't get everywhere else. I mean, they're so DC biased, which is because to start with, it used to really get my goat. But now I just see it as almost like a caricature, and he acts it out as well. Like he loves acting it out. Yeah. But I really do like it. There's one guy on it though that's he's a bit bro dude, and he's like what most people think of because when we think of when most Brits think of Americans, it is like that frat house kind of like bro dude. And there's somebody that goes on, once he turned up pissed, and it's the only podcast I've not been able to listen till the end. He was like, no, listen, no.
Oh, is that the guy that moves that's not on the show anymore?
Yeah, thank fuck. I can't stand him. Yeah. He's harsh. Oh, and it's like what's her name? You watch John Campion's show?
Yeah,
sometime.
From time to time.
The blonde lady, Erin.
Okay. Yeah.
Such a what do they call it? Is it a Sharon? It's not a Sharon, is it?
A Karen.
A Karen, yeah. Yeah, such a Karen. Don't you take another step, mister. So bullshit. But in actual fact, from having spoken to a number of Americans over the last 2 or 3 years through this podcast, you're not too different from us. You just sound silly. We have a lot more in common than we do different, Tim. Let me tell you that much.
That's true.
But yeah, in general, I think what happens is there's a reaction and then I react to that reaction. And I think the problem is when I see people saying things like, of course it is, it's Tennessee, it's obviously racially motivated. What annoys me is you might be accurate, but you have not done your due diligence. You've seen the headlines, you're reacting to it, and you don't even know the intricacies of what's actually happened. I'm not saying you, Tim, but I briefly went on Twitter to see what the reaction was, and the reaction was exactly what I thought it was. I don't object to the idea that it was a racially motivated conservative decision. But like I said, I don't like the immediacy that everything is polarised. In my point of view, it should be, as you said, it should be in there, it should be optioned, you can take it home, let the parents have a look at it, and if they don't, then you have a secondary text. And it's as straightforward as that. But for me, the immediate reaction, I don't know, dude, it just... Do you think we'll ever get away from this sort of hysteria?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think that. The way in which we are so deeply divided, at least in this country, deeply divided, and the presence of social media makes it hard to imagine undoing the ratchet. You know, it's like it ratchets to a point, it's just like hard to release.
Do you know what I think honestly is the problem? I think that most people are against something that doesn't exist. I'm not saying like there's not racism, but I mean in the most general thing. I think people see something, they imagine there's a group of people that hold that opinion, and it's inflated in their minds, and then they react to what they suppose. And then, of course, the people that are slightly on the other side are seeing that reaction, and then they're reacting to the other reaction. There's this void of hot air in the middle. Let me try that again. People aren't actually reacting to things that happen. They're reacting to an anticipated reaction of the people that they oppose. And I think that the actual extremes on the left and the right are so small. When something like the banning of MAUS happens, people rally together against this preconceived notion of the whole of, say, the right or conservative people all wanting this. When the middle is probably much more expansive, it's probably 80%, maybe 85%. And all that happens is that 85% gets narrower to 80, to 75, to 65, to 60. Because people just get sick of hearing the opposing side. And I almost feel like there's not... Most people don't care. They wake up in the morning, they put the shoes on one at a time, they brush their teeth, they go to work. If they're drawn into a conversation at work, they might have it, but then they'll forget about it. I think that the left and the right are rallying against their ideas of what the opposition is, as opposed to what's actually a much more politically agnostic middle ground that is a lot more expansive. It's not virtual signaling, but I think that people like to feel like they're doing the right thing. Do you know what I mean? They need something to rally against, because if you don't have anything to rally against, then how do I get to show what I think? So when there's an opportunity for it, there's almost this, not like mythical, because of course this book did get banned. There's like, that's actual fucking fact.
Yeah.
But I think that sort of sets, puts matches between the toes of people that are like, right, they're at it again. Who are they? We're not sure, but they're out there. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
And then there's like, people like to be part of a team. So like it's kind of like just like sports partisanship. Like
exactly. Yeah.
Something bad happens to the New York Yankees. That fact alone delights me. There are rivals. My team, right? It's like any other thing. Probably like English football, same thing.
The problem is Leicester's so good now. All our local rivals are in the lower divisions, so we have to pretend we have to generate teams. Like if someone beats us one year, like we'll go, those bastards! Look at them! How dare they beat us? Right, they're the ones we're hating this year. It's fucking Tottenham, and it will always be fucking Tottenham until Forest, Derby, or Coventry are promoted, and then Spurs will put them on the back burner. But it's the same thing.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, is your EPL minute. But I do think that, like, at least here, you've got, the problem is social media and that's part like a small part of it, but it's like also like for-profit news media is a major problem.
A huge problem.
Yeah. So that is, if those things, if that doesn't go away, then there's no way any of this is going away. I do think though that this would not be a story if it did not occur in the context of a broader movement to censor like students' access to certain types of texts. And so if it weren't for that, I think this would have had like a very minor splash rather than the bigger splash of the time. You know, the thing about MAUS, it's sad because text is so rich. I mean, it's so such an important book. I mean, I think we just talked about it right at the top. I mean, this is not just another comic book. This is like one of the most important comic books ever published. In fact, it was awarded a special Pulitzer Prize upon publication. Well, not upon publication, but after, you know, the following year or so. To sort of honor its importance. And so it's a little sad. I mean, we haven't covered the book. We should probably cover it at some point, just because. Yeah,
we will do. We'll book it in for once we've finished Warren Ellis, and then we have the interviews out the way. We'll do Bone, and then we'll do that. I'm not ready to get back into the news cycle yet, so we'll just do a couple of classics. Maybe we'll do a month of classics.
It'd be an interesting conversation.
We could do Bone, MAUS. What else? Maybe one more. Then have a week off. Is there another classic? They are. You know, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, let's have it off the air then, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's answer that one. Let's spare the audience that displeasure. So, Tim. How would you have felt about them taking words out or panels out of any nudity? I mean, it's cat dick, so I mean, or mouse dick. Like, I mean, how graphic could it be? Or would you say just stick it in, or don't bother? Would they be the two binary choices, or would you have? Is there a level of censorship on page to page that you would have been happy with?
No, really. I guess if I had to compromise, rather than saying all or nothing. Maybe I would say all, or parents who are concerned about it can elect to have their students read the slightly abridged version.
But I think we can't just look at this in isolation. For me, I always use this term when I have a nice lady on a call center for a help desk, not for someone that I owe money to that's asking me for money. When I need their help, I'll say thank you very much. What is it? Not a Sharon. What's it called?
Karen.
Karen, yeah, Karen. Okay, Karen, before we start, I need to let you know that I'm at the end of my tether. This is the fourth call that I've had to make on this, and I'm still not getting anywhere. If I am frustrated, I am not frustrated with you. I am just generically annoyed. And I'm probably going to swear. But I think we're all okay with that, being as we have a television. But if this gets too much, don't say you're going to end the call. Just let me know to wind it in a little bit, because I will try, but I'm going to need your help on this. You can't protect kids.
Yes.
There's an even bigger question even if you should try. You have to contextualize it with the medium and the world that we live in. Look at the third Transformers film when James Bay realizes that you can probably get away with one fuck but as many shits as you want. There is like a shit count. There must be one on YouTube, but it's literally every 15 minutes. And that's not even PG-13, is it? That's just PG. Or is it PG-13? Yeah. That's probably PG-13, isn't it?
Probably PG-13, yeah.
And that's like, you wouldn't get stopped. Those kids wouldn't get stopped from going into a cinema, would they? They'd just be going in. No, exactly. Like, you have to contextualize it with the world in which we live and all of the content that is available. Netflix. I bet you half the kids, probably 90% of those kids, don't have a parental lock on their Netflix account.
Yeah. Or TikTok. Like, come on.
TikTok, man. Yeah, exactly. TikTok brackets big cock.
Yeah. But your point is well taken that we tend to assume the worst of like our enemies, you know. So I hold out the possibility, and I haven't read the transcript. What you're telling me is all I know about it.
I should have sent it to you out of fairness, but I only heard about it just before we came on. It was the last thing I did before I got in the shower, and then I was 15 minutes late for starting.
And I was 20. I was the extra 5 for my coffee.
Time well spent, because now I have one as well.
You do tend to assume the worst, so I guess I hold out the possibility that any actor is in fact acting in good faith, even if they're wrong, right? It could be that they're genuinely concerned about mouse dick or something like that, or whatever, but I think we tend to assume, and I don't think we're not often wrong, that it's a pretext or more nefarious, especially with respect to race in this country. I mean, this is maybe an isolated thing that's a little bit, it's different. I mean, this is not this is not dealing with like American racism at all. It's
such a specific thing, though, and in a school, that if it was, like I said, the initial vote was 6-4. It was 1 vote away from being split.
I wonder what convinced people to move over.
It was the legality of it, the hassle of doing it. They tabled the motion to discuss it, which was the split one, and then when they got into the details of is it apt or not, there's actually a very good part of the transcript where it is clearly 2 very opposing sides talking about it. The one that thinks it should be protected and the one that thinks it should be jettisoned. When they arrive at the fair usage, like IP part of it, and the technicalities of doing it, by the end it's just a whitewash. Like, that seemed to be where it turned. But again, it is a very convoluted document, but that's just the bureaucracy of board meetings and the way that they're reported.
Yeah, I mean, the inference here then is that even at 6-4, it was really 10-0 to have some form of either redaction, like either banning it outright or redacting it in some way. Like, nobody on that board was like, let's just keep it as is.
Oh, well, I think it wasn't, the actual decision wasn't made on whether it was suitable. That was the middle part of it. And then they said, like, we need to, what are our options? Well, we could do a redacted version. Will that take away the poignancy of the book? Is it still worth having redacted, or does it just ruin it as a body of work? How do we stand legally under fair usage? And also, if we don't do any of that and we keep it, what's the reaction from the parents going to be, and is that worth it? So it was when they considered those options and they decided that the only option was to either keep it or get rid of it. And then that was when it was 10-0 at the end. But there was like a very, I wouldn't say heated, because it's like business talk typing. It wasn't people just railing on it for half an hour. There was opposition to it until they got into the nuts and bolts of the legalities and whatnot. It was kind of like the discussion became, is this worth the hassle for our school keeping it?
I mean, the answer is yes, it is, guys.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. But I'm saying, like, it wasn't just like half an hour's railing on it. But I think as well I have to be careful in my contrarist nature that I wasn't just reading it looking for it to be that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm very aware that I have my own bias going into it, because I was like, all right, let's prove these cunts wrong. Oh, yeah, all Tennessee's racist, is it? All right, well, let's have a look and see then. Don't worry, guys, I'll sort this out. I'll read it and come back to you and let you all know what the real thing is. Of course you're all fucking wrong, because I'm so fucking clever. Don't need to read that page, don't need to read that page, don't need to read that. Oh, here we go. This is what I was looking for. This one sentence.
In reality, what would happen here is like there would come to a page where there's like some mouse dick on it. Now, keep in mind, this is like this only arises in like the concentration camp context. Some little asshole would like make a joke about it, and some kids would like just have like laugh about it for a moment and then move on. Like that is like the stuff, like you're saying, like, keep in mind the context in which this is occurring. It's 2022. Kids have unfettered access to like frankly pornography. Like, it's hard to block that. Yeah. So whatever, I mean,
and also
these old, man.
And also, did you ever have it? This is the irony. Have you ever, did you ever, Tim, ever have a school textbook that did not have a cock and balls drawn on it?
Hell no.
That's the irony of it. I would say to them, if you can bring me one textbook that someone has not drawn a cock and balls on, that has been in this school for more than a month, then we can get rid of MAUS. But until that moment,
exactly.
until you bring me that cock and balls free textbook,
veiny dick right on your book.
yeah, big hairy bollocks. It's funny. My cousin, we were watching Lord of the Rings, right? And who's Hagrid in it? Hagrid, the big one, and he goes. He just looks at me like he's worked it all out. He goes, I bet Hagrid's got really hairy balls and a tiny dick. And it just makes sense, like this bushy mott of pubes, thick, wiry, dark ones, and then this little mouse nose peeping out. That's the sort of thing you get in textbooks. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I just wanted to make sure that we had our platform to talk about this, and I felt that I knew that we'd be able to put a balanced discussion. Some of the things that I'm saying, I'm not like, I want to make clear that like, it's not necessarily even my opinions, it's just, what do you think of this per se? So I've probably made myself out to be a bit of a conservative loon on this episode.
No.
But no. I know, but you're the reasonable person I'm having the discussion with, Tim. But I just think it's important to at least ask the opposing questions, if only to reconfirm what you think in this scenario. I mean, for me personally, I think everybody should self-censor, like you said, give the parents an opportunity. If the kids aren't comfortable with it, I mean, I can remember going across to my neighbours when I was young, and he used to be into horror, and I had nightmares about Freddy Krueger.
Sure.
Like, and that's mythical. Like he's not real. Again, I've not read MAUS, so I don't know how graphic it is, but it's the Holocaust, and I would expect that with that and the fact that there is this controversy, that it is quite a graphic depiction of it, because you've got to protect the weakest of any group, haven't you? Do you say we think this book is acceptable when we should be looking at the weakest element of any class? However, like I said, there's easy workarounds, alternative texts.
Exactly. And just from my perspective, thinking about it, I have little kids now, but I would absolutely want my kids, you know, I guess I don't know what my kids are going to be like when they're 12, like how sensitive they're going to be. But even if they were, I definitely would. Here's the thing. I would want them to be able to read the book and be taught the book. That's the thing. It's like, yeah. Anybody can read the book. Like, I have a book on my shelf, they can read it. The question is, like, are they going to get instruction on it? And I want that. You know, I want that.
I would have been bored out of my mind, mate. I wouldn't have been able to read it.
That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like so interesting now, but I probably would have been too. I don't know. American kids are such fucking selfish assholes. It's insane. I know I was.
I think that's just being a kid, mate. I don't think that's inherent to only America.
But I'm excited. We should read this and just set the politics aside and just like consider it on the merits. I'd be interested. I think we'd have some discussion about it.
Yeah, definitely. I actually went out with a girl that was obsessed with the Holocaust. Like, it was almost sinister, to the point where she just consumed so much information on it that like she'd be having like nightmares where she'd wake up screaming in the middle of the night. It was fucking weird.
Oh, wow.
Well, she was the weird kid, clearly, the one that shouldn't have ever been introduced to it. Sexy as hell, though. And is there anything more evocative than a lady crying? I say no. Just stroking the back of her head. There, baby. There. But yeah, she. I think that's enough on that one, don't you?
Yeah. So put a bow on it.
Okay then. So, right then, guys. I'll await all your hate-filled responses on every platform. Hopefully, Tim won't be tarnished with my tarred and feathered with the same brush that I deserve to be after that. But yeah, I mean, some things we don't do politics on this as a general rule. But this is such a hot potato. I felt like we needed to weigh in on it.
Yep.
All right then. This will be a double drop. No, it won't be actually, because I've not edited any of the podcasts we've done recently. I think I've 5 of them stacked up, but they're not time
They're
sensitive.
not new.
They're not new, so it doesn't matter. I'll get to it. Right. So yeah, this one will be dropping maybe today, maybe tomorrow. I'll get this one out, and yeah, thanks for joining us. So that only leaves me one thing to say. As always, we have been, and this is the end.